Hello guys, Lego here, and in today's video I'm going to do a mini mock showcase of some of my custom Lego Ninjago minifigure stands. So if you follow my Instagram, I have posted about the majority of these before other than the Lloyd one and I think the Zane one. But I just want to go through all of these and show you the sort of design philosophy that I went through for all of these and just give you some sort of tips and ideas and if you want to mimic this idea to display your minifigures. So without further ado, I'm just going to basically explain like the origin of how I just came up with the idea. I'll get the very first one I ever built, which was the coal one. And basically, I was just sorting through some of my spare pieces a little while ago. And I came across like quite a few of these rounded corner pieces. So I was like, what if I could use these pieces as just to sort of basically make a minifigure stand? Just for some of my minifigures. And in this case, it was obviously my Ninjago ones. But I wanted to make them themed around their character and their element. So because of the nature of the show and the characters, it's really easy to create a themed base for them just because of using their elemental pair, in this case being coal, which is earth. I just took some of my spare parts that would, like the browns and the greys, that would sort of emulate that earth sort of material. And I liked just sort of basically built it up in a way so it's sort of terraced, so it has some depth towards it rather than just being completely flat. And as you can see here, I just sort of put a 2x2 at the back to basically be the highest peak of the set, or the build rather. That's going to be where the minifigure stood. So I just basically built up around it, just basically placing different pieces in different combinations to sort of build a nice little rugged terrain here in Cole's case. As well as some specific elements like this crystal piece, just to obviously emphasise that he's the master of earth. As well as some just translucent orange studs down there, just to sort of obviously hint at his sort of secondary colours like earth, like lava almost. Then on the top there, where the minifigure would stand, is just a sort of jumper plate, so he's not really restricted to any sort of specific rigid pose, like if he is to be on sort of normal stud orientations. So I found that the sort of singular stud from the jumper plates allows me to have a bit more versatility in the way I want to pose them. In some cases in the future, which I'll show you, is getting them in some cool action poses. So rather than just being completely flat, I'm actually able to pose them in sort of cool, fun and dynamic ways just to make the display that bit more interesting, rather than just being a static display of the minifigure in like a case, for example. See, that's my very first one that I built, and obviously I continued that and carried over that design philosophy for the majority of the ones I built. So I'm going to review these all sort of together because they are very similar, just obviously their builds are different because it's supposed to be respective to each of the specific ninja. So my next two, and probably a couple of my favourites, is the Nia and Jay one. So the good case with Nia, I actually found one of these pieces in blue, so there's a bit more continuity between the build rather than just being grey here for obviously Jay. It works for Cole's case, but I didn't have too many of these blue pieces, and I definitely didn't have any in yellow. But as you can see, I've got both of these two on their action pose, the little clear action pose pieces. So that just basically helps to give them more of a dynamic pose here. As you can see, I've got sort of Jay and Nia both sort of leaping out at you. And that again just gives the build more depth and makes it a bit more interesting when it's on the shelf. Now for Nia, I just kind of went with like, she's like jumped out of the water and it's created this sort of wave ripple effect. And I've used a mixture of some of the light azure colours, translucent blue, and at the back this dark blue, translucent 2x2. Just to sort of act as, again, the peak of the build. And I use this rounded dome piece to basically give the water some flowy texture rather than being just a sharp stop at the top. So it looks like the water is actually coming down around her feet. So that's really cool, but if you don't want that action pose, I can actually take that off and obviously display her similar to what Cole is like. But yeah, I've just used an arrangement of studs and cheese slopes to basically get that cascading falling water. So I was really pleased with this one. It's probably one of my favourites. I just love the colour with it. And the minifigure I've chosen is just her sea-bound suit with her hairpiece. I thought that this figure is really specifically fitting for this build in particular. And then Jay's another one of my favourite ones. You're obviously all familiar with this one because it's the one on my profile picture. But I feel like it just captures the essence of what I was going for perfectly. How it just completely captures his element here of just the lightning and just a really cool pose of him up here. So I have got most of the ninja with their golden weapons and in their ZX suits. But I just used a bunch of these translucent yellow and blue cheese slopes and studs just to simulate like his lightning effect. But I really like how I've arranged the cheese slopes here, how they're all at different angles, so it's sort of like lightning. It's just basically all erratic and not very formula. So I just really like how that's accomplished here with just all these different angles of the cheese slopes. And again, I've used a 2x2 here, but this time it's a rounded one. And again, a similar one to Nia's, I've used a rounded sort of 2x2 plate on top, and just used an action pose piece on top just for him to jump. So those two are some of my favourite ones. And now let's move on to a couple more. One I'll get to in further detail, which is obviously Lloyd, but Kai here, same sort of formula here. I actually found one of these pieces in red in my collection, and I just basically used a variety of different flame pieces to sort of simulate him about to go into spinjitzu, or he's like cast a big fire on the floor. And again, just using an arrangement of colours from his colour scheme, obviously dark red, orange and red in there, as well as a little bit of black just to give it some depth, like there's some lava underneath. But yeah, I've got just some of the typical flame pieces, the candle piece here. And I just really like how this one's come out. This one's a bit more flat, so I imagine he's on the ground and he's about to go into spinjitzu. But I like how the fire is just basically right in front of him and actually gives it some texture and some detail. So I'm really proud with this one as well. So moving on to Lloyd. This is probably one of the hardest ones I had to build just for the idea, because Lloyd's element isn't really a defined thing. Obviously, in the beginning of the show, he has like 4 different elements. He's obviously the master, or like the culmination of lightning, earth, ice, and fire. But as the show sort of goes on, he just sort of gets this green energy, I suppose, and obviously the golden ninja as well. So I originally had it as a bit of a bigger design, similar to my Garmadon one here, where it's just basically a combination of all 4 of those elements and using one of his older minifigures. But then I just recently got quite a few of these crystal pieces. I was like, what if I just use these as, like, sporadically through the build? So it's not like the other ones where the focus point is their element. Obviously with Kai and Cole, for example, it's a really earthy base and they're basically all fire pieces. I've thought of one of my favourite seasons, which is Tournament of Elements, and it's one of Lloyd's main seasons. I thought if I build some sort of pillar ruins, like it's the Anacondrite temple that he's just sort of running through, and just basically sprinkle in loads of different sort of translucent green pieces to obviously capture his element of energy or whatever it's supposed to be now. But this one's definitely the most unique of the regular ninja here, because obviously it's not based off entirely his own element. It's more of like a picturesque sort of scene, like he's basically running through a ruined temple, but there's obviously elements of his element obviously with these green pieces here. And again, I've used another one of these action pose pieces just on the back of his leg there, like he's jumping over it. But the pillar builds are really simple. I've just used these column pieces that are like, I don't know how you describe this, like textured, just to basically look like they're staggered here. Like this one's fully broken, this one's partially broken here, with just some of these slope pieces instead to make it look like the top's been just eroded and like broken away. So that's another one of my favourites. I really like how this one turned out, and I was not a big fan of how I originally drew up his design, where it's the 4 different elements combined, because it just basically looked like really contrasting colours basically plastered right next to each other. I think it's still on my Instagram, so if you want to actually check that one out, you can obviously find it there. But I much prefer this one because it's much more minimalist and it fits in with the rest of the designs here. But I do have 2 more which break away from this design philosophy of using this curved corner piece here. So I'm going to show you those 2 individually. So the last of the ninja, and the only ninja that doesn't use the design philosophy of the corner wedge piece, is Zane. So I actually, when I was making these, ran out of the corner wedge pieces when I came to Zane, and I couldn't find any more. So I had an original design which was more of like a cave wall, and I really was not a big fan of how it looked because it was really delicate and it did not look great. So I just went with a more simple design. Rather than him obviously using his element, he's just running basically through like a snowy tundra or something. But I just used some simple greebling to sort of give the base more texture. So the main base of it is just a bunch of these circular pieces just stacked upon one another, just to basically obviously give the snow a much more rounded look, just around the edges rather than being quite sharp. And I like how it gradually builds up to the peak there. And this is probably the only part that stands out. It's this light blue jumper tile, so that's where Zane stands, but I feel like it just captures the essence of his character really well. We've got a simple assembly, like there's a little bit of snow build up here, almost becoming a snowman with just a rounded piece and a 1x1 cylinder on top. And as well, these cheese slopes in light blue that are transparent, just sprinkled out to look like ice, basically, like he's basically putting ice on all over the floor. So this is probably my least favourite of the ninja ones, but I feel like it captures the character well, and it's the best I could have done so far with the parts I had. I may try in the future to carry over this design philosophy to him and try and get some more of those corner wedge pieces, just to basically make him fit in with the rest of the ninja. But it's nice to have one that's a little bit different to the rest of them, and obviously the story behind it is obviously not great. It's just basically I ran out of the pieces and I couldn't build it the same as the other ones. But I'm still sort of pleased of how this turned out before my first draft. My first build of this was also completely awful. Same with the Lloyd. I was not a big fan of those two. And I've just sort of reworked them and tweaked them around to sort of fit my liking, and I feel like I've done a good job here. So I'm going to move on to my final one, and this is not a ninja. This is actually Lord Garmadon. So I found him the most fun to create because of like the origin of his character and the pilot and the original season, how he's basically come back from the underworld. So here's his 2011 minifigure here. I'll just put it to the side. And I used a variety of different black, purple and printed elements to basically capture his character. I used this portal piece that I got from a Nexonite set from my brother, one of those minifigure packs. I'm not sure which one it was. But I used that as like the background for like as if he's just come out of the portal, and I've just basically attached that on a simple assembly. It's not the most pretty assembly, it's some random pieces that I've just built up. It's just connected on a Technic pin there, but it gets the job across. And I really like how that looks, and it's cool that it's a print element too. And I've used some of the lightning bolt pieces to look as if he's come through the portal and there's like lightning crackling all around him and stuff, just to give them that menacing feel. And I always love those pieces. Those are always great pieces to get, and I've found a good way to use them in a build. And then just at the base here, I've just used a variety of black and purple pieces because that's obviously his main colour scheme in the show. But yeah, I'm just sprinkling some purple cheese slopes and studs around to sort of look like his menacing aura or energy that's sort of spreading out the portal. And as well, just using some bone pieces because obviously he's the general of the skulking army in the pilot season. So I felt like that fit the character a bit well. The only thing I'm not a big fan of is the way I built the base. You can obviously see the grey a lot sticking out, so I might try and rework that a little bit, but it's for the moment it gets the job across. Another thing I've done is put these black tentacle pieces in the front of him, as well as this horn here, to basically just look like more evil energy or like creatures that are basically clawing out the portal and just surrounding him, just to basically emphasize he's supposed to be a menacing evil character. But yeah, that is the last and final minifigure base I have made. I may make more in the future for the newer characters like Sora and Aaron. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to check out some more LEGO videos on my channel, I'm going to leave a few pinned videos on the screen now. And that is all from me for now, and goodbye.